We need to handle events in our application because we want the user to be able to click on a title and display an alert of some kind. And to do that, we're going to use Angular's event binding syntax. So we're going to put movie name inside a span here, and then I'm going to declare the click event, and I'm going to surround that in parentheses and then make that equal to some function that we will later define. You've probably seen me use brackets before. Now I'm using parentheses. And so brackets help us define property bindings, and the parentheses defines event bindings. So I like to think of it as the brackets are my setters and the parentheses are the getters. And so now we're going to go into our component and we'll define that onClick method that we referred to in the event binding. And we're just going to set an alert of hello world. And when I click on these titles, I should get that alert. And we do. So that's great, but lots of times when we make these components, we don't necessarily want to define the action on the list component itself. We might want to make a contact list, or in this case, a movie list, and then have the parent component define what it should do. So maybe you just want to make a selector and tell the parent component which one was selected. In order to do this, we have to make an output event, and we do that by importing the output decorator, just like we imported the input. Components can have inputs and outputs, so we already defined an input of that show rotten variable that we're no longer using. But now I'm going to make an output variable or an output event called isClicked, and I'm going to make that equal to an event emitter. The event emitter is going to help us pass up our value to the parent component. It can do a few other special things like do synchronous and asynchronous events, but for all you need to know right now is just that we're going to pass up the value through the output here, which is a type of event emitter that you want to make sure you import with the Angular core library. And back in our component, we're actually going to redefine that onClick method, and we're going to change it this time, and we're going to say isClicked.emit, and then the value that we're emitting, we're sending back up. And this should say isClicked, so I got to change that. But you're going to use emit because emit is a special method that we get from the event emitter, and then we're just going to take the value that we get from onClick and pass it to the emit, and then our parent component should get that. And make sure we pass in the actual movie here inside the template. So let's check this real quick to isClicked. And then, because we have this output decorator, just like the input decorator, we have a new property exposed on our movie list component that we can actually feed in from the app component. So now in the app component, we can define the method that should happen when an item is selected in the list component. So here I'm in the main app component, and you'd probably do it other places in a bigger application, but we're still keeping it small for demo purposes. And I'll say clicked, and I'll define a function here, and now we'll make a new alert from the app component. So we'll say hello world from app component, and then we'll set this function on the movie list component. So anytime something is selected, this alert should get fired from the app component. And again, because we've made an output and it is an event binding, we'll say isClicked equals clicked. And make sure you actually call the function. So I defined the function, but I didn't call it here with the parentheses. And I can actually pass in the movie. And we'll distinguish this by the $event. So the dollar kind of signifies an event here. So in this case, the $event is actually the movie parameter that we passed in our movie list component. So if I actually go back into the app component, I can log the value of the movie that's coming through. And so we'll catch it here through the click method. And then I'm just going to log it below our alert. And we'll try it again after a refresh. Click it, Batman. And then in the console, you can see that my whole object is here for me to use. Passing events like this back up to the parent component are really valuable in decoupling your components and making sure that you have super reusable generic components such as a movie list or a contact list. But before we go, in our movie list component, earlier I defined my output property as isClicked, and this should probably be changed to something more like onClicked, because isClicked is more descriptive of a Boolean value, whereas onClicked is more descriptive of a function or a method that we're calling. And so we can do a lot of things to help out other developers and just self-documenting our code by naming variables appropriately, as well as defining our types more. And we'll get into that later.